Okay, well, welcome everyone to the Qdabra weekly webinar. I hope you're all having a great morning. Today we'll be talking about an InfoPath alternative that we've discussed before, and we're going to go a little deeper into what's behind the scenes, underneath the covers on PDF ShareForms. And we're going to look at the XML schema behind PDF ShareForms, and then we're going to look at some extended features in PDF ShareForms that you won't find in their documentation, and look at an example of how you can use scripting to achieve some of the features that are out of the box in InfoPath, but right now you need to use JavaScript in order to achieve those same results in PDF ShareForms. Now, before we dive in, for those of you who are new to Qdabra, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what the company does. We are focused on SharePoint and InfoPath solutions and eForms in general. So there's something for everyone here. We have a community site, infopathdev.com, which is an active forum that also contains various downloads, sample templates, blogs with tutorials, and if you post to the forum, we will provide support. We try to answer questions, as many as possible, in a 24 to 48 hour time period. We also have support options. We have pay-as-you-go support if you have an emergency or an urgent issue that you believe needs our attention. We have pay-as-you-go support options. We also have larger support packages if you think you're going to need continuous support as well. And if you have a large project that you need assistance with, we offer consulting work as well. We have 3 InfoPath MVPs on staff and a number of additional employees such as myself who are able to offer consulting work for short-term and long-term projects as well. And we do also offer InfoPath classes. We have an InfoPath 101 class as well as an InfoPath Master class. I believe we have some upcoming classes in December. Visit our website, www.qdabra.com, and click on Training to learn about the dates for our upcoming classes. Okay, so a quick overview of PDF ShareForms. We've done a previous webinar on this, so if you're interested in the basics, I would encourage you to go off and find that one. I believe it was back in the May time frame, so if you go to our YouTube channel, you'll be able to find that video there. But just to review, PDF ShareForms, they offer several different types of products. This is essentially a interactive PDF forms similar to InfoPath, but using the PDF format that's been popularized by Adobe. It's cloud-based, so there's no equivalent to InfoPath Filler. The form deployment is in the cloud. You can upload PDF form templates and manage them online. You can submit them to a SharePoint library or via email. That's the simpler PDF ShareForms on-demand client, where you don't actually need to have your own SharePoint server or your own SharePoint site in order to use PDF ShareForms. You can simply upload them to the cloud hosted by the company itself. Then there is the more advanced PDF ShareForms Enterprise tool, and this is actually a SharePoint embedded PDF designer and viewer. So everything is embedded directly into your SharePoint site. There is a package that you install through central administration on your server, and that enables the designer and the viewer on your SharePoint site so that your users or your form designers don't actually have to interact with the back end of the server. They can just interact directly with the site. We'll be seeing that a little later as well. You can design rich templates online. Many of the same features that are available in the InfoPath browser forms are also available in PDF ShareForms. You deploy these templates to SharePoint libraries just as you would with InfoPath. You have the ability to submit forms to a library, submit them via email, or even do anonymous submit as well for external users who may not have an account on your SharePoint site. There are support for all sorts of advanced controls, text boxes, drop-downs, multi-select, checkboxes, etc., as well as form logic behind the scenes. And as we'll see at the end of this webinar, you can also do some fairly advanced things with scripting as well. It's available for SharePoint 2010 and 2013, and there's also interactivity with mobile devices as well, so you can fill out forms on mobile devices. So the part of PDF ShareForms we're going to focus on today is the back end. As I said previously, this is a PDF solution, so the user is going to see a PDF form and interact with a PDF form. But there is an XML schema on the back end, so this is not just your everyday PDF form. And why this XML schema is important is because it allows you to have a copy of records. So we're not just storing data. This isn't just someone entering fields in your regular old interactive PDF form and then having those data fields submitted to relational tables or a database somewhere where you lose the structure of the data. You're actually able to store these PDF documents, not just the data that's inside them. Another thing that's important with having this XML schema on the back end of PDF ShareForms is that it allows you to do client-side validation. So basically making sure that the structure of the document and the data that's in it are actually valid for the template that you've designed. Without this schema embedded in the template, you would have to rely on the server to do client-side validation, which means that you wouldn't be able to do anything asynchronously and you wouldn't be able to have offline people filling out forms offline. So this enables you to not have that constant connection to the server. And so you can fill out forms offline and the forms can be validated right then and there, which ensures that when the forms are submitted, you don't have to worry about getting invalid data. You know that every form that's been submitted to your library or via email has the correct format and all the data embedded in it is exactly the way that you want it to be. So you don't have to worry about analyzing bad data. Okay, let's take a closer look at what's going on in the PDF ShareForms XML schema. So here on the right I have a snapshot of the designer for the PDF ShareForms Enterprise. And this is slightly different from what you would see in InfoPath. In InfoPath you're used to seeing let me actually switch to my PDF ShareForms designer. So this is the PDF ShareForms template. This is PDF ShareForms Enterprise embedded in one of our internal SharePoint sites. And this is where all of the templates that you design will be listed. This is not where the templates are deployed. This is merely where you go in order to access designer mode. So I'm going to open up an expense report template that I designed a while back. And here it is. Now some of this will look familiar to InfoPath users. Off here on the right we do have a list of fields. This is very similar to the fields pane that you would find in InfoPath. Up here is simply, this is the toolbox. This is equivalent to the control section that you usually find up here along the top in the InfoPath ribbon. I'm going to collapse that for a second. Over here on the left what we have is a hierarchy. So with PDF ShareForms you actually insert sections in the document, and this contains a hierarchy of how those sections are arranged and what fields are inside each section. So this is something that you don't see in InfoPath. It's basically, think of it as a list version, a list version of what you're seeing on the design pane. So everything on the design pane, here's the header. For example, this is embedded in its own separate header section, and you have to include these special sections in your template as you're designing it. That's something that InfoPath doesn't force you to do. But back here on my slides, which have disappeared, there we go. So this is a snapshot of that hierarchy, and on the back end in the XML schema, these different sections underneath the hierarchy are actually referred to as subforms. So this is where the XML backend contains a listing of basically the layout of the document itself. So that's embedded in here, and you can see these are all named. These have the same names that you see over here. There's the header, there's the employee info section, manager info, report info, expenses section, and the submit report button. And what I haven't highlighted is all of these sections are actually controls. And in fact, all the fields on the form correspond to controls as well, but the sections themselves are assigned control IDs, and these are used elsewhere in order to determine what actions should be taken when the controls are interacted with. So over here, I've drilled down inside the employee info section, and over here, if I expand the employee info section underneath the hierarchy in the design mode, you'll see that I have various labels as well as fields. And what you're actually seeing here are the controls corresponding to the field. So if a data field is not displayed on the actual design pane, it won't appear in the hierarchy. The hierarchy is strictly a list of all of the different fields that appear on the form. So if you have a hidden field behind the scenes that you're not showing for whatever reasons, it's not going to appear in the hierarchy. And here I actually have a snapshot of what you're seeing on the design pane. Here are those 4 fields, the 3 text fields, as well as the drop-down for department. Over here in the hierarchy, you can see I have name, email, job title. This is the little icon that PDF ShareForms uses for text field, and over here you can see it has a little icon for drop-down, so I can see what controls are bound to these fields over here in the hierarchy. And something that InfoPath doesn't have are these label fields, and these are basically text that the user is not meant to interact with, even though behind the scenes you can see that it is also assigned a control value, or sorry, a control ID. You can think of these labels as essentially, if you've ever used a calculated value to merely display just straight up text, not another field, not a calculation, just text, that would be the closest thing that InfoPath has to these labels. But these are unique to PDF ShareForms, and they're strictly for typing in text. That in this sense, I'm using it to demarcate the employee information section, but it's for text that the user is not meant to interact with. So that's how these fields are represented in the subform section that corresponds to the hierarchy. And if we drill down even further, now I'm looking at the department drop-down, you'll see that all of the information that's needed to display this particular drop-down in the correct location on the form is embedded in this section. This department drop-down is actually bound to a SharePoint list, so you'll see this bind node here. This will tell you that this particular control is bound to a particular data source. Down here you'll see that the actual font and the point size and the alignment are all specified in this section. It tells the form exactly where to display this drop-down, as well as the label, the caption for it. And then down here we see a PDF ShareForms node that indicates SP list, that stands for SharePoint list. So this actually goes off and queries or this is bound to a SharePoint list on my SharePoint site that pulls in the values for department. Inside these brackets are the parameters for the query. So you'll see it's going off and finding the departments list. It's finding the department column in that list. It's sorting it by ascending, and there are a couple additional parameters in here that are not specified as well. And then there's also an event associated with this SharePoint list, and basically it says to initialize this control with the results of this query to the SharePoint list. And over here we actually have JavaScript going on. So this particular XML configuration file that contains the schema also contains a section that has various JavaScripts that are executed. And in this one it's simply saying find the script that initializes fields, and we'll pass it all of the values for this SharePoint list query. So that's all going on in the subform section of the XML backend. Now there's also a section in here that is used for validation. It's called, I'm calling this entire XML file the schema, but within strict XML parlance, it's this section that is the actual schema. And you can see it's given an ID that ends in XSD. So this is the actual schema. You'll see it has a list of all of the fields that appear in my form template, as well as the data types. So this is used for the validation. And this is what enables PDF ShareForms to do client-side validation, because all of the data fields are listed here, as well as all of their data types, so that when someone submits a form, it can be validated before it is submitted. So that's the schema section. And I also wanted to give you a snapshot of the code, the JavaScript that is embedded in this XML backend. I have a submit report button that you saw earlier on the slides. It was in the subform section that determines the arrangement of the controls on the form. This is given a control ID, and this is where these control IDs are really useful. Down here in the script section, there is a button click rules script, and this executes all of the different button click rules in the entire form. Here you'll see that very same control. So this, everything that follows this UI control 43 contains the information that's needed to execute that submit. And you'll see down here it calls a JavaScript function called submit to SharePoint. And then below here I just have a snippet of the JavaScript that's involved in that. And you'll see down here it's actually submitting the form. And it contains the information that's needed. You'll see references to the default submit URL. That's the URL behind the scenes that is the URL for the form library that I'm submitting to. So all of that information is embedded in this XML backend. And when you design the form, you're basically configuring the parameters for all of these different scripts that allow you to do all the various functions and actions that PDF ShareForms allows you to do. So I want to quickly show you how you can get to this XML backend. Let me find, there it is, my form designer. So you can view this XML backend but not interact with it directly. This is different from if you've ever examined the insides of an InfoPath form template, which you do by going to, let me see if I can remember it off the top of my head. You would go to properties, you would go to publish in the InfoPath designer, and then you would go to export, I believe it's export forms or export files. And that would allow you actual edit access to the back end. You don't have edit access in here, but if you go to the Page Design tab and click XML, where was I? Yes, so if you go to the Page Design ribbon at the top and click XML, it will actually show you all of the XML behind the scenes. And this is actually a good way to get a sense of what scripts are running behind the scenes. What I would do with this, since it's not very fun to read this, especially when it gets down into the variables section, is simply Control-Alt, copy it, and then I have an editor. My editor that I use is called Notepad++. Paste it in there, and then if you do the control sequence on your keyboard, Control-Alt-Shift-B, it will actually, I think I have to save it. There we go. It will actually recognize this as an XML file, and it will give you the ability to expand and contract sections, so you don't have to read through all of that. So let me see if I can find, this is initial configuration. So here's that schema section that I was talking about. So this way you can actually examine. So if you're having a problem with a particular field and you think the validation really isn't working right, you can actually examine and see behind the scenes, okay, so report date really is a date time field. It's not a string. This expense code really is a string. You can examine all of the fields in the form as well as fields behind the scenes that PDF ShareForms uses in order to perform these various actions. So that's a good way to examine the schema in detail if you want to actually make sure that all the fields are set up correctly. And here's the template. And here are the subform sections that I was talking about before. There we go. There's the header section, the employee section, manager info, report info, expenses section, and the submit report button, which has its own section the way I've designed the form. So you can drill down inside those, and you can examine in particular and see exactly how these different sections and the controls inside them are organized. So this is a good way to take a look at the back end. If you're interested in seeing exactly how everything is arranged, I think it would be great if this were editable the same way that the manifest.xsf file is editable. This is really the equivalent of that manifest file behind the scenes. But for right now, it's view only inside PDF ShareForms Enterprise Designer. Okay, so next we're going to take a look at a couple of advanced techniques. One nice technique that you can use is populate a drop-down list using a people picker that is bound to an Active Directory group on your SharePoint site. So this is the equivalent. This is the equivalent of the people picker. Basically the default people picker functionality when you publish an InfoPath template in browser mode, or when you publish an InfoPath template to a SharePoint site. It allows you to connect to the Active Directory behind that SharePoint site and populate the people picker with the information there. So essentially what you do is you create a SharePoint site column on your SharePoint site the same way you would if you were creating a SharePoint site column for any other functionality. Then you would create a people picker data field on the form and add that control to your design canvas. And then you use the data field properties menu and the basic properties menu to link the control that people picker control to the site column, and then configure the source to point to that SharePoint site column. So let's take a look at how that's done. I keep forgetting which one of these windows is the one I want to show you. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to go back to, right now I'm viewing the XML backend, and I'm going to go back to normal view, which will give me my pretty design canvas back as well as the hierarchy on the left. There we go. So I have already done this for this manager name right here. So let's quickly look at this. This manager name is a people picker type. It does not look like the people picker that you see in InfoPath. It's a completely different design. But what I did up here under data field properties, I have linked it to a particular SharePoint column called managers. And then underneath properties and people source, I'm doing all this with the manager name people picker selected. Under people source, I made sure that it is, the default for this is manual, by the way. I selected inherit from SharePoint column, and it automatically recognized the managers column that I bound it to under data field properties. So let's actually take a look at how we would do this. So I'm going to replace this name field. So let me go ahead and delete that, and I'm going to create a people picker. So let me drag that onto the canvas here. It's going to make me name it. I'm just going to call it name PP to differentiate it from the name field that I haven't really deleted behind the scenes in my schema. Just like InfoPath, you can't name two different fields with the same name. So I'm going to name it name PP, and I'm going to leave everything blank. I'm going to auto-create the data field associated with it, and here I have my new people picker. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do with my new people picker is go to data field properties. You'll see that it's not linked to any SharePoint columns. I'm going to click this menu, and now if you had just added a new site column, it wouldn't be in this pre-populated list. You'd have to select from site columns. And I created this under custom columns, so I'm going to trust that you know how to create a site column on SharePoint and that you remember what group you've assigned that column to. Mine is under custom columns, and I'm just going to reuse the manager's site column that I already did. And one important thing to know is that when you create the site column, you have to make it a people picker column. So let me really quickly go to my site settings and look at site columns so that you can see what that would look like. All right, I'm on site settings. I'm going to site columns. And then underneath custom columns, here's the custom columns section. Managers, so you'll see that it is actually a person or group column, and it needs to be a person or group column or else this technique won't work. Okay, so back to my designer. So I've selected my managers column. I'm going to click Save. So that binds this people picker control to the managers column. Now I have to select the data source for my people picker, and instead of manual, I'm going to click Inherit from SharePoint column, and it's automatically going to recognize that column. I'll click Save. And now, if I publish this template out, let me save it, and then I'm going to deploy the template. Remember, I'm in the designer right now, and I still need to deploy the template to its SharePoint library before I can use it. So I'm going to click Deploy, and I'll leave all this the same. I've already configured it for the correct library. It validates the template on the client side, and then it deploys the template. Oops. It looks like I had this open in another browser window, so I need to go through this again and make sure that it knows that this is the one I want to deploy. That's one thing about this deploying process. You may have, because it's a browser-based designer, you may have the browser, you may have the designer open in more than one browser window, and you may forget about the one you were designing yesterday that you didn't save your changes in. This deploying process will alert you to that fact and basically tell you, go search for that other browser window and make sure that you don't have unsaved changes there. If you want to ignore that other window, you can just go run through the deployment process again and it will update. Okay, so we've deployed it. Let's go ahead and open up a new form template, open up a new form in the expense report library, and we'll see that people picker in action. There we go. And I have a number of other things going on in this particular form, but here is that people picker and the manager name one below. There are some design issues with the people picker, as you can see right now. The drop-down does not appear on top of the label, but if I wanted to search for a person, it filters as I'm typing. So if you know a partial name, it will filter and display only the matches, and you can select the name from that list. And there you go. That's how to use a people picker bound to Active Directory in PDF ShareForms. Okay. And the last technique I wanted to show today is an example of scripting. Now, right now, the out-of-the-box functionality, well, I shouldn't say out-of-the-box because it does allow you to do scripts, but let's just say the WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get functionality for PDF ShareForms is not quite as expansive as what you're used to in InfoPath Designer. So to get some of that functionality back, you do actually have to add some JavaScript behind the scenes. So in this particular case, I have a field where I have a field in a repeating section where I want another field to appear if the value in that first field is greater than 75. So what I've done is, so this is basically a hide show rule, which many of you have done before, based on a condition involving greater than. So it's not an equality condition. So in order to do this, you need to use a field exit rule. Unlike InfoPath, you can have rules running under many different types of user actions. So in InfoPath, you actually have to exit the field or change focus, basically click somewhere else or tab out of the field in order for the rules on that field to run. In PDF ShareForms, thankfully, that is no longer the case. You can have a rule that runs when someone enters a field. You can have a rule run when someone has changed the value in the field, even if they haven't yet exited. And you can also have a rule run when you do field exit. However, if you want to get some of the more advanced functionality, you have to put your rules on field exit, which is the equivalent of the functionality that InfoPath has. So in this particular case, you would choose a field exit rule. You would have no condition, no built-in condition on this rule, and instead you're going to execute a script that contains the condition itself. And this is the raw text of the script. Because it's a repeating section, you have to essentially set the focus for this rule to that particular section that the user is interacting with. So that's what this var section equals this dot parent is. And then after you've set the focus with that first line of script, you have the condition if this dot raw value, and remember this is running on the field, this is running on that particular field, so the word this refers to the field that the rule is on. So we have this dot raw value, which gets the actual raw numerical value of the field. If that value is greater than 75, then I have another section that you'll see when I switch to design mode. I am setting its presence to visible, so I am essentially saying please show this now. Else, if that condition is not met, stay hidden. And the default is hidden, so I technically don't need this else section here. No, I'm sorry, I misspoke. I do need the else section because if someone types a value greater than 75, then this will be shown. If they then go back and correct and say, oops, I meant 7.5 or 0.75, then this else rule will kick in and it will re-hide this receipt section. So let's go ahead and see that in action. Let me bring up, here's my form template. So this is all happening down here on this expenses section, which is a repeating section. So PDF ShareForms does allow you to have repeating sections. I have these small minus and plus sign buttons here. These buttons allow you to add a new row or delete the current row, similar to InfoPath. And what I have here is basically this, as you can see, this is an expense report. This is where you enter all your individual expenses. And what I wanted to do is if the amount of the expense was greater than $75, I want them to attach a receipt. So that's a common scenario where you want receipts if people submit large value, large dollar expenses. And down here I simply have a total button that is summing up all of the amount, all of the values in the amount. If you're interested in the way the rest of this expense report section, this expenses section works, please check out the previous PDF ShareForms webinar which demonstrates this exact same form. Okay, so I want my rule to run on the amount field because that's the number that's going to determine whether or not to show the receipt section. So I highlight the amount field on the design pane and I go up here on the properties ribbon. There is an actions button. I'm going to click that, and these are all of the different actions that can be used to kick off rules. This is really great about PDF ShareForms. I can have a rule execute when I enter this field, when I change the value of the field, when I exit the field, when I click on the field, if the field is completely full, if I move my mouse down over the field, if I move it up over the field, if I enter the field with a mouse click, if I exit the field with a mouse click, all sorts of different things. So this really enhances the interactivity of your form, much more so than InfoPath. Okay, but we're going to use the field exit, which is the equivalent of the way InfoPath does rules. So I'm going to select field exit, and this brings up all the rules that I currently have executing on field exit. So here, in order to add another rule, you would click this Add Rule button down here. I'm going to delete that because I don't need it. And I'm not putting any conditions here. Now normally you'd be able to drag different conditions and different scripts. This was all covered in the previous PDF ShareForms webinar. But in order to use a script, you want to leave this condition section blank because your condition is going to go in the script. So under the then, which is, so this if is the equivalent of the condition in an InfoPath rule. And then is the equivalent of the action section where you add all of your different actions. So all I did was drag execute script, and then that created this blank script, and I entered my script value in here. And because this is a repeating section, remember I have to set the focus to the current section with this var section equals this dot parent. And that's pretty much always going to be the same. If you have a repeating section, you're going to include that first in your script to set the focus to the current row in your repeating section. And there is the script that I talked you through. So that is already there. And let's go ahead and see this in action. So here's my deployed form. And down here, I'm going to enter an amount. Let's enter 45. And the receipt section stays hidden. Let me add another row. There we go, add another row. And now I'm going to type in 100. And you will see down here, oops, I have a extra character there that I should have deleted. Now you'll see the section that says expenses above $75 require a receipt. Please attach a receipt here. And if I click the attachment field, it comes up and I can actually go ahead and attach whatever I would like. I don't think I have anything. There we go. We'll pretend that's a receipt. And it'll actually show a little tiny icon of that receipt in there. And you'll see the total field down below is keeping track of everything in there. So that's how to use a script to get back some of the InfoPath functionality. And that's how to use a script in a repeating section as well, which is very important to know. And right now you do need scripts in order to get this sort of functionality, but there are several things you can do with rules out of the box. If you want to just do a simple equality, you can do that out of the box. If you want a field to contain another field, then that is, or if you want to know if a field contains something, so for example, if you have a sentence and you want to know if it contains the word duplicate, you can do it that way. Not equals, blank, not blank. If the form is new, that's a great one. If you have anything you want to do, if you want to initialize any fields, you would use this form as new. And this also supports digital signatures that I hope that we'll be able to cover in a future webinar. So if the form is not signed, you can do things in that case as well. All right, that concludes today's webinar. I wanted to give you some information on the cost of PDF ShareForms if you're interested. PDF ShareForms On Demand, which we did not cover today, but which was covered in our previous webinar. It's $75 per month. Per block of 50 SharePoint users, so the cost depends on how many users you have with your forms. PDF ShareForms Enterprise, this starts at $7,900. This was what I demoed today. It includes the browser embedded designer as well as support for up to 100 SharePoint users. for the starting fee. It includes the license for it, also the mobile client, so your users will be able to fill out their forms on mobile devices, as well as tech support and training to get you started. And what you've seen today are the free trials. These are fully functional free trials, 30-day trials available for both of these products. So if you're interested, go ahead and go over to the PDF ShareForms website and sign up for those. The website, by the way, is simply pdfshareforms.com. All right. You will be able to get webinar kits. There will be no kit for the one that you've seen here today other than the slides. This is free for those of you who have attended the webinar if you send feedback. If you've missed the webinar and you want to get the files behind the webinar, or if you are browsing our YouTube site and you find a webinar that interests you, and you would like to get the materials for that, it's just $29. You can purchase it through our web store. The link is shown here. And here's the PDF ShareForms website here, pdfshareforms.com. Well, thank you all very much for attending today's webinar on PDF ShareForms. When you sign out of the webinar, you will be prompted to answer a survey. If you send us your feedback on that survey, you will get today's presentation as well as any interesting demo templates. Since this is a PDF ShareForms one, there are no demo templates to send, but you will get the presentation slides along with all the screenshots. All right. Are there any questions that anyone has about PDF ShareForms today? If so, please go ahead and type it in the questions pane, and I'll try to answer those. All right, it looks like there are no questions, so thank you very much, everyone, for attending. And if you do think of some questions or some follow-up comments, please don't hesitate to contact us at support@qdabra.com. Thanks very much, and have a great day.